Now, let's add a little bit of animation to this to make it jump out. So I'm going to zoom out. I'm holding down the Alt key with the zoom tool to be able to zoom backwards. And I'm going to hold down the space bar to go ahead and pan so I can see more of my text. Now, since I'm going to be working with animation, it's usually easiest to switch from the design workspace to the animation workspace. This is under Window, and switch over to here. Now I want to create an animation that causes all my letters to move to the position where you see them now. So let me go ahead and create a new timeline. And we're going to call this Letters Animate In. Okay, now for starters, 5 seconds into my animation, I want all my elements to be at the position they're at right now. So I'm going to advance the playhead to 5, use the selection tool to select all of my elements, and drop down a keyframe. Now what I've done is I've established that wherever I move my elements, 5 seconds in, this is where I want them to be. So let's start at time 0, and let's move all of my elements off the artboard so they'll look like they're animating in. Let's take the first 4 letters and move them off to the left. I'm going to take the last 4 letters and move them out downward. So if we look at this animation, all of my letters will slowly move onto the artboard. You know, that's looking a little bit slow. Let's speed up some of the animations. I want the letters in Word to be there, say after 2 seconds. So I can click and drag these keyframes to change how long their animation lasts. So once these are all moved out, when I hit play, you'll see that the word Word moves in much more quickly, but Game is still taking its time. Okay, that's a little bit better, but let's do something a little bit fancier. I'm going to select my letter G, move my playhead back to time 0, and I'm actually going to add a rotation onto my G. So let me switch back to the Properties Inspector. Let me roll down to the Transform category, and let me add a rotation of 360 degrees. Now when I press return, it doesn't look like the G is moved, but now watch what happens when I press play. The G is rotating around until it ends at the desired location. Now why didn't the G just rotate about its own point, but had this more erratic rotation? The reason is, take a look at with the G selected, there's a small white circle up here. That's the render transform for the letter. So as it rotates, it's actually rotating about that point. And as my animation moves, you'll see that that point moves along with the G. So if you look at any particular moment, the G is so many degrees around that particular center point. I could modify the render transform and that would change how the G would end up rotating. So let's take a look at that. Let me move back to time 0. Let me select the A, and let me move its render transform. Now, let me add a rotation onto it. Let's say a 720 degree rotation, so it will rotate around twice. Now let me press play, and the A is going to rotate around a little bit differently, but it's still going to end up at that desired point. I can move my elements around wherever I want, so long as I don't modify that keyframe at the end, they're going to end up at the desired location. So let me go back to time 0, let me select my M, and let me have it rotate backwards. And I'll select the E, and I'll also have it rotate backwards. So now when I hit play, all my letters are going to scatter all over the page until after 5 seconds, they all snap to where I want them to be. Okay, this is starting to look better, but one of the problems I have is that abrupt, okay, everything's in the desired location. How can I change that? Let me scroll down a little bit, and I'm going to right-click on these ending keyframes and tell them to change the ease in to 100%. The easing modifies the interpolation so that if I tell it to ease in at 100%, it'll start off fast, but it'll slow down as it approaches the end of the animation cycle. So let me switch this one, and the last one. So now watch when I hit play, they're still starting off moving rather fast, but as they come in, they slow down and have a nice gentle ending where I want them to be. One last trick I can do, these keyframes are established so the positions are set, but I can modify the timing a little bit. So let me drag this keyframe out just a bit and move these around similarly. And now watch when I hit play, they're going to actually end up settling into their final location at slightly different times. These are all just little visual tricks that you can do to have different subtle effects on your animation. And you'll see that we've done all of this without any code, just modifying a couple properties here and there, and everything falls into place. Now let's take a look at what happens when I actually run my application. When I press Help, the About dialog is instantiated, and my letters come floating in.